I just finished listening to something that truly encouraged me and challenged me in my role as a wife, and I couldn't keep it to myself. It's Tilly Dillahay's Wife School, and it's incredibly practical for real marriages.
You will do better by your husband to win him with your meek and quiet spirit, your gentleness. And, assuming that your physical safety is not in question, I would say a wife's ability to continue to gently live with and support and speak kind words to her husband are so powerful. And how about let the failures happen? Like, back up and let him fail a bit, because that's how you learned.
Women don't know how to be content in their lives. We have too many ideas. Sometimes women don't really know what they want.
A woman is the air in a house, and it can be sweet air or it can be foul air. Somehow women have forgotten how to catch flies.
Yes.
You catch more flies with honey.
What is the simplest way to start feeling grateful when you're already fed up?
By giving thanks. Go through the motions of giving thanks.
It's all a farce. They're playing these roles to placate these insecure men.
And I know that because I'm a woman too. Yep.
Hi friends, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. I'm Ileana. I talk about the intersection of politics and parenting, and today we are talking about Wife School. This is a $17 course on how to be a better Christian wife made by Tilly Dillehay. I considered buying the Wife School program, but I ended up deciding not to because I didn't want to give any of my hard-earned money to this Christian nationalist grifter. Plus, thanks to incredible writers/creators, Tia Levings and Elena Trueba, I didn't have to. They went to Wife School for us. But also, Tilly Dillehay basically gives out all of her Wife School information for free around the internet, if you're willing to dig just a little bit. And lucky for us, I am willing to dig. So today, we're going over what Wife School is and how you can be a better Christian wife. Now, before we get into it, we need to address the title, Wife School. As I started looking into this, there was a moment where I couldn't remember the name, Wife School, and I typed Bride School into Google. And it became immediately clear to me why Tilly did not call this Bride School. Because Bride School, you guessed it, has ties to fascism. Bride School was famous in the Third Reich, teaching women how to be the perfect Aryan wives to their Nazi husbands. This is not Bride School. But it is worth pointing out that when Tilly has previously published books, it's been through Canon Press, created by Doug Wilson, a self-described Christian nationalist. So now let's get into Wife School, and you can make or not make any connections that you might see to Bride School. Here's Tilly's pitch. I don't really like my husband. Well, I don't think it has to be that way. Give me 6 weeks, Christian wife. In 6 weeks, one new stone at a time, you can build a whole new set of habits that dramatically improve the atmosphere in your marriage. Comment free and I'll send you the first 2 weeks to try. So right off the bat, this is how she is positioning Wife School. If you don't like your husband, that's a you problem. He couldn't possibly have any flaws that he could work on.
In Christian marriages, a husband and wife can be deeply committed to each other and genuinely love one another, and yet still experience a good bit of tension in everyday life. I just finished listening to something that truly encouraged me and challenged me in my role as a wife, and I couldn't keep it to myself. It's Tilly Dillahay's Wife School, and it's incredibly practical for real marriages. We all desire peaceful and Christ-honoring marriages, but many of us have never realized how much the way we speak and respond influences the thermostat of our homes. Scripture tells us that the wise woman builds her house, and I'm beginning to see more and more how that work begins with the Lord shaping my own heart first. This course isn't about changing your husband or carrying responsibility that isn't your own. It's about personal growth, learning to steward your words and your tone and your communication within marriage. As Tilly herself points out, not every example will apply to every marriage, and circumstances do vary, but the heart of this course is firmly rooted in biblical truth, and I do believe it will help wives move away from striving and tension and towards clarity and peace, learning how to speak with more wisdom, encourage intentionally, and trust God to work. And it's just 6 weeks. Invite a sister or two, make it a girls' night, discuss the lesson, pray together, do the homework, and watch what God does in your life and your home.
As we get into this, we're going to go through the course's lessons using clips from Tilly's Instagram and primarily clips from a Culture Apothecary podcast she did with Alex Clark. This Alex Clark.
Less burnout, more babies.
So let's start with Tilly's main lesson. We kind of already started here. Wives are the problem. When you get married, you should expect your husband to be the leader of your family, and you're there to support him, encourage him, and put in effort for him. She describes marriage like riding a tandem bike.
This analogy before of marriage being like a tandem bike. So it's a bicycle built for two. Have you ever ridden on a bicycle built for two?
I never have, but I've seen lots of Bugs Bunny episodes.
That's right. Okay, great.
Or whatever cartoons that has that.
So a bicycle built for two is a scary thing to ride on the back or the front of, really, because it's really unwieldy. It's long. And the person who's on the front has to know how to turn the bike but they've got an extra person, an extra weight on the back. So the communication between the two is pretty dicey. But on the back of the bike is even scarier, in my opinion, because the back of the bike has handlebars that don't move. All you do is pick your feet up off the ground, which means you know we're either bouncing or not. You have to pick your feet up off the ground, and then you have to pedal as hard as you can. And that is what being a woman married to a man is like. You have jumped on the back of a tandem bicycle, and he's on the front of that bicycle because God put him there. Whether he wanted it to be there or not, God put him there. And your job is to pedal with all of your might and to learn how to lean with him and to learn how to support his efforts as he moves this family forward. But it's scary because you're watching him for years. You're sitting on the back of the bike. And guess what? For him, he has a woman sitting on the back of the bike watching every mistake that he makes in all of life. And you are the one person that he most wants to respect and to think that he's doing a great job. He wants that. He wants to know that you think he's doing a great job because you're the number one witness of his life.
Yeah.
So you get, but at the same time, you've lived with him for so long, you know what his weaknesses are. You know what the things that he can't do or that you think that he can't do.
Marriage shouldn't be scary, right? I've been married for almost 5 years, and at no point in that would I say that I've been scared or that it's been scary. Also, like, is she trying to convince people to get married? Because this sounds horrible. The wife is an extra weight, communication is bad, you're scared, you're doing the hard work without any of the decision-making ability. Why would you willingly sign up for that? Well, because that's what you do. Marriage is the be-all, end-all in this culture. You're nothing unless you are a wife and a mother. So what should you do? Lower your expectations. Change yourself. Stop wanting so much. Here's what Tilly says. I'll narrate because this didn't download with sound, but basically she says women want too much. Why women want so much from men? Why do you think it is that women have higher standards for their husbands than their husbands have for them? We have a really long list of things that we want him to be and do. We want him to be a great provider. We want him to be intellectual in some way. Maybe we want him to have a great personality. We want him to be a spiritual leader. All of those things. And you just don't catch men usually having this long list in their heads about their wives, watching their wives as closely as their wives seem to watch them. I think that this is an indicator of the fall. I think this is part of the curse in Genesis 3, when God tells Eve, your desire will be for toward against your husband, but your husband will rule over you. I think that even when you have a man who's not an overbearing husband, maybe he's even more of a passive husband, that curse will still show up in the fact that she is dominated by thoughts about him, even if she's not dominated by him. So she's dominated by thoughts of all the things that he's not doing and can't seem to stop talking about it often or thinking about it in a way that he's usually not obsessively thinking about her faults in the same way until he's confronted with them in the form of criticism. So what's the solution? I think the solution is we have to learn to live with this orientation towards him in a way that's going to be an actual blessing to both of us instead of a clear indicator of the curse. Okay, so women want too much from men. Sorry, in what world is that true? Let's go through her list. She wants a provider, an intellectual, a great personality, and a spiritual leader. That's 4 things. 4 things. That's what she considers to be so much. Also, this idea that men don't have a long list is bananas. Maybe they can't express all of their wants verbally because this culture never asks them to do any self-reflection, but they want so much from their wives. They want a wife who is wholesome and sweet and gentle. They want a wife who is modest. They want a wife who is totally dedicated to them. But they also want a wife who is completely in charge of the entire domestic sphere. They want their wife to serve as a maid, a cook, a childcare provider, a personal shopper, a therapist, a chauffeur, a homeschool teacher, and someone who never refuses sex. After watching this video, I cannot get the song Labor by Paris Paloma out of my head. I can't play it because of copyright laws, but I will read you some of the lyrics. All day, every day, therapist, mother, maid, nymph then a virgin, nurse then a servant, just an appendage, live to attend him, so that he never lifts a finger. 24/7 baby machine, so he can live out his picket fence dreams. It's not an act of love if you make her. You make me do too much labor. Also, just a comment on this video in particular, Christian nationalists like this have a language of their own that is kind of gibberish to people who are not in the cult. She said, I think the solution is we have to learn to live with this orientation towards him in a way that's going to be an actual blessing to both of us instead of a clear indicator of the curse. If you did not grow up in the church, which I most certainly did not, this sentence means absolutely nothing to you. But this is the kind of language that they use. This is the kind of in-group speak that they have. So when Alex, who was unmarried at the time of this podcast episode, she's engaged now, asked if she should try to find a man who is okay with her big personality, Tilly basically said, no, you should be less.
If there's a woman listening who is similar to me personality-wise, and sometimes when she speaks, she can have an authoritative tone, how do you work on that in a marriage? How do you dial that back? Because I mean, I just speak for a living.
Right.
You know, I know how to speak authoritatively in everything I do, talking on the news, podcasting.
Right. And you're rewarded for that in this kind of sphere.
Yeah.
It works better, you know, to do a podcast that way. But it's not going to make a man feel like a big guy. You know, it's not going to make a man feel like a man.
And I understand that, but is there also something to be said that the right guy is going to be so in his masculine that he is not threatened by me?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're definitely going to have to pick a person who can live with a strong lady, you know.
Because it's not, I mean, even the way you're talking, you are so gentle in the way you speak and everything. That isn't natural for me. So I'm trying to figure out, like, I don't want to be a quarrelsome wife. You know, I don't want to ever disrespect or emasculate my husband. I want to reel in those things before I'm in that chapter of my life for sure.
Right.
So I'm like, how do I work on
Yeah,
that?
so it's not a matter, this is, you know, I think there's a really good concern here of like, are you telling me to slouch? You know, are you telling me to take my heels off?
Right.
Because I'm with someone who's not tall enough, you know?
Yeah.
Figuratively speaking. And I think there's a way to do that. But part of it may feel like taking your heels off,
Okay. I'm listening.
right? So maybe this is a matter of thinking to yourself, I don't have to have the answer every time. There is some feminine part of you that I think is essentially, and it's an essential part of the feminine spirit that wants to allow the masculine to do for them in some way, to serve them, to protect them. There's a part of you that wants to be protected. There's a part of you that wants to be led. And I know that because I'm a woman too.
Yep.
And there's a part of you that doesn't want to have to be the one who always knows what to do because someone else might know what to do in that situation. And so this might be just a matter of practicing asking for help from the masculine and saying, I can't do this. Could you do this for me? Or even not, I can't do this, because maybe that's a lie. Maybe you could pick up the chair and move it by yourself.
Yep.
But
I see what you're putting down here.
but would you move this chair for me?
Uh-huh.
Or I have a headache and I need to lay down. Would you watch the kids for me for a few minutes?
I'm so sorry. I need to do a better job of controlling my face because I cannot stop rolling my eyes. But I want this to be an actual critical take of this and not just me being annoyed. So I'm going to pull it together.
So it's not that you're telling women it's bad to be opinionated or have a lot of knowledge about a lot of different things. It's knowing when is the appropriate time to voice them.
Yes, or I would say there are a lot of times I think that we believe he can't do something, and part of why he can't do it is because we've never let him do it.
Yeah.
We have never backed the heck off and let him learn.
So basically, you need to change yourself for a man. There's no way that you should expect to find a man who likes being with a strong woman, who wants a woman who can take care of herself, who has a big personality, who makes her opinions known. No, the best you should hope for is to find someone who can live with it. Tilly's advice is basically pretend to be someone you're not. Pretend you can't lift a chair by yourself. Pretend you're incapable so your husband doesn't feel emasculated. Pretend you have a headache so your husband can watch the kids. What are we doing here? This is their biggest fear. Men who aren't masculine. It's why they are so repulsed by anyone who doesn't fit their strict gender binary. Because it breaks down their entire worldview. The next section we're going to get into is arguments and tension, which are obviously the wife's fault. Here's what Tilly says.
For the married woman who is listening to this and she's in a season she just hates her husband. I mean, because there are people that are struggling right now. To the single woman who is single and she doesn't want to be, she desperately wants to be married, who's listening. How can we find as women true contentment no matter the season we're in?
That is the real question. Like, that is the real challenge, I think, in marriage and out of marriage is contentment. I think that's probably the number one issue facing women. Women don't know how to be content in their lives. We have too many ideas.
Women don't know how to be content in their lives. Oh, fuck off. We have too many ideas. Oh, we're too smart. We have too many thoughts. We can't have that if we want to be content. Be stupider. Have fewer ideas.
About what's needed to make us happy. And if you ask almost any woman who's married or not, if you ask her, like, what's the one thing that you need in order to be really happy? The answer is like waiting behind her lips. Like, it's right there. There's always something, like when my son gets back from college and I can see him again, or when we get the kitchen remodel done, or when my husband takes me on a date, because he refuses to take me on a date. I've asked him a million times, he won't take me on a date. Like there's it feels like there's always that thing kind of waiting in the wings when you're speaking to a woman about that she'll bring up at some point, and it's the thing she's waiting on in order to be happy.
Yeah, I don't think she's wrong. I think that people do have things that they're waiting on to be happy, but if someone were to ask me that, like, what would make me happy as a wife? I don't know, universal child care, universal health care, federally mandated paid parental leave. The things that would actually support so many wives and mothers are systemic. They are not individual things. Obviously, she's only listing individual things like, oh, when my husband takes me on a date. Why won't he take you on a date? And part of the reason she's listing all of these like individual personal things instead of bigger systemic things is because this culture squishes women into little boxes that live inside the home and only inside the home. They are so consumed by their everyday life and the domestic sphere that they aren't thinking beyond that. But there are systemic things that would help them too, like, lower grocery prices, lower gas prices. All of those things she's obviously not listing, but those would help too. Obviously, okay, I'm going to let her continue.
I think one of the big secrets of contentment is recognizing that this world is not our home and this place is not our place. So learn to expect that in life, you're always going to have a little piece of longing that's not ever going to be met until you get to heaven and you see him. That's where it's going to be met, which means that everything that you're doing now, every little pleasure that he gives you, every meal that's a great meal, has no seed oils in it. It's got all fresh, beautiful ingredients, and you're looking at it, you're saying, this is gorgeous. That's a little shaft of pleasure and glory that God has given you in that moment, and you can thank him for it. But it's not the thing that you're waiting for. It's just a little taste of the thing that's coming. And so every pleasure that you have in your marriage, every time he does see you and you feel totally seen, you feel totally loved, he makes a decision for you and you feel totally cared for, all those things are beautiful reminders of who God is. They're kindness from God that he used your husband to send to you, but they're not the final thing. That's one of the hardest things about marriage is when you're single, when you're young, or when you're a kid, your whole life is out ahead of you. It's all open possibilities. Every dream that you have, you think this may be fulfilled. And life is like one series of closed doors after another. It's a bunch of different roads, and every time you take a road, it's a bunch of roads you didn't get to take. So growing up is a slow process of disappointment, but in the best way. Like, it can be in the best way, or it can be in the most embittering way. Like, you can become more and more bitter because of the losses, and life just brings loss after loss after loss. But if you're walking with the Lord, every loss is just another step closer to heaven. And so you can accept the good things that he gives as a gift from him, but recognize that they are not the main thing that you're waiting for.
She claims to be so happy and so content, but says that life is just a series of disappointments and losses and closed doors. Tilly, are you okay? Might I recommend therapy? SSRIs? You seem kind of doom and gloom here. I do think that this clip gives a good insight into her worldview. This is the true Christian answer. You cannot be content until you get to heaven. And because women are not content, that's why we cause arguments.
Sometimes women don't really know what they want. So I think there's kind of a twofold answer to this. Number one, I think that our desires are so multitudinous and so undefined, even to ourselves, because we have dreams and ideas of what life should look like that aren't even logical necessarily. Because sometimes desires are not compatible with each other. And I don't know if women have always been this way, but I do know that today's woman is like this. We want a lot of things. And sometimes those things cannot all be acquired at the same time. And some of them are just not possible even.
So, like, what's a good example of that?
Like, a good example would be, here's a real small down-to-home example. It's not possible to have free-range chickens in your yard and also have a yard that doesn't have chicken poop in it. I'll tell you that from experience. It's not possible. It's not logical. You have to put the chickens in the gate, and then you don't get them to be lovely free-ranging in your yard, or you have a dirty yard. It's not logical to have both of those things. It's not logical and possible to have a husband who is a city dweller who's smartly dressed and who is maybe really outgoing, and also have a quiet and thoughtful guy who knows how to, who lives in the country with you and helps you keep your chickens. Like, I'm just saying, we think we ought to have little tiny smatterings of all the kinds of things in lives and men and children that we've ever seen and loved. We think we could have all of those things at the same time. And it's not possible. And it's not logical either. So I guess women need to learn to think about their desires in a more logical way, I think, to lay them out and just say, okay, is this a reasonable thing to desire? And then can I get this desire stated in a way that's clear enough, even to me, that it would be helpful to say it out loud to my husband so that he could help me maybe come up with a solution, to meet with that desire. So I guess, so that's one thing. It's just desires, having them be within the limits of reality and accord with reality.
Women are causing arguments because we don't know what we want. We're too stupid to understand our own desires. We don't have the critical thinking skills or logic necessary to have opinions on our own lives. We think we can have all of those things at the same time. We who? Unless you're missing some critical wrinkles in your brain, you shouldn't think that you can have a husband who is a city dweller and a country boy. The examples she gives are so ridiculous and make women seem silly and unserious and honestly dumb. We're not logical enough or reasonable enough to have wants, so we need our men to help us. They literally think women are so dumb that we need to bring these issues like chicken poop to our husbands. Hi, my brilliant husband. I've come across a quandary in my homesteading. I want to raise chickens, but I don't want chicken poop in our yard. Whatever could we do to find a solution? As though women aren't smart enough to, fence in a chicken coop, split your yard into multiple pieces? But this is part of her bigger message that women shouldn't expect to have it all. You just have to learn to be content and grateful for what you have and know that you'll never be truly happy until you get to heaven. Okay, the next thing we're going to get into is Tilly's advice to thank your husband. This is a key part of wife school, and it is part of wife school's homework to thank your husband 3 times a day.
One of the first things that I'll often do is put a wife on the homework of just saying 3 thank yous a day. And that's like step 1. And part of that is just when you do try to say it, if you're not used to saying that to your spouse, it's like gravel in your mouth. Like, it's so unfamiliar that even saying the words feels unnatural and weird. And I've had many wives come back to me and say, like, he looked at me after the second time I said thank you and said, "What do you want?" And to her, and I think rightfully what you should, the lesson there, and of course that's an ungracious way to respond, but the lesson there is he's not used to hearing this.
Yeah.
Like, he's not used to hearing this. So maybe, some very specific little challenges like that are we find that very helpful, just to say, all right, try saying thank you 3 times a day and see how does that feel? And also what it gets you doing is looking for what are the things you can say thank you for. And it's very common, I think, for a wife, this cycle of her being more and more disappointed in him. Like, he doesn't seem to want to spend time with me. He keeps failing to do the things, anything that I ask him to do, he's not going to do it. You see this in middle-aged couples. I don't know if you've seen unhappy middle-aged people who stay together. That cycle is so familiar, where she continues to tell him all the disappointments that she has in him for years and years and years. And for some reason, he doesn't want to spend time with her. And you from the outside looking in, you're just like, you are difficult to be around. You're unpleasant to be around. But it's so hard for her to see it because her complaints are real and they feel very real to her. They have been her constant companions for years. The fact that he won't change the light bulb, he won't fix, the thing around the house or be a man and lead the family, spiritually. Like, these complaints are real things. They affect her life. So the stakes feel very high. And with children, the stakes feel very high.
This male-centric worldview is so harmful. The crazy part is that this isn't necessarily bad advice. Thanking your partner for the things that they do around the home, taking out the trash, cooking a meal, folding laundry, is a good idea, but it shouldn't be gendered. Both partners in a marriage should appreciate one another. In these relationships, women do so much of the domestic labor, both physical labor and emotional labor, but rarely get any sort of recognition. And actually, they should be doing more. Tilly breaks this down into 2 categories. There's the check engine wife and the fuel tank wife. Basically, the check engine wife is the nagging wife, and the fuel tank wife is one that fills him up, fuels him. So let me show you a video from her Instagram. Again, I'll narrate because this didn't download with any sound. Here's the check engine wife. Thinks he left his clothes next to the hamper again. I'm married to a child. So she says, wow, so close. Just can't seem to find that hamper, huh? love it, dripping with sarcasm. He thinks, yesterday it was something else. She will never be pleased with me or respect me no matter what I do. The typical result, irritability, and likely still clothes on the floor tomorrow and broken fellowship. And then here's how the fuel tank wife would handle the situation. She thinks, I want the floor clear, so I will clear these. I am married to a man. This means he thinks differently from me. It is also just possible he is overlooking some annoying things that I do. She says, thank you for going to work, loading the dishwasher, praying with the kids every night, taking me out, putting the chickens up, going out in the cold to start the car for me, going to the dump, killing the mouse, making it possible for me to stay home with the kids, calling the plumber. He thinks all is right with the world and the angels are singing. The typical result, he still leaves stuff on the floor when you are 50 years married and you stopped caring about the clothes 30 years ago. Okay, so in both scenarios, your husband never learns to pick up the clothes from the floor. And you wonder why the wife who is married 50 years is annoyed still and bringing things up from years past because her husband is still acting like a damn child. It is frustrating when your husband can't do the simple task of dropping his clothes 12 inches further. It's understandable to be mad about that, especially when it's clearly a habit. She'll never be pleased with me. I don't know, buddy. Seems like she's asking for something pretty simple that would take less than half a second of effort, but you don't respect her enough to follow the simplest request. Then he's irritable and you're irritable. Tilly says it's your fault for pointing out the clothes on the floor, not your husband's fault for leaving the clothes on the floor in the first place. Your reaction is the problem, not his action. The solution? Suck it up and do it yourself. Every bad behavior your husband exhibits is because he's a man, so his brain works differently. Sorry, does his brain not comprehend what a laundry basket looks like? Does he have so little spatial awareness that he's physically incapable of getting the clothes into the hamper? The excuses they come up with to lower the bar for husbands are ridiculous. And then she expects wives to overly praise their husbands for doing the most basic tasks. Thank you for loading the dishwasher, praying with the kids, starting the car for me in the cold. Is he thanking you for that stuff too? Or is he just expecting that of you because it's your role?
Talking too much, I wouldn't have said was one of my problems getting married. But I did not understand, even someone like me, I didn't understand how many ways there are to inadvertently emasculate or disrespect a man. He hears things differently than we would. A man hears our words differently. And when we think that we're helping him by giving him suggestions for how to do something that's really his responsibility, it's in his court, that comes off as disrespect. He hears it as disrespect.
Men don't hear things the way we do. Girl, what? The reason they don't hear things the way you intend is because they're intentionally misunderstanding you. Because you never learned to communicate properly as a couple when you expect the wife to be meek and demure and do whatever her husband says. He hears it as disrespect or emasculation because he's looking for that.
So a lot of the things that we do to try to be helpful or to say our truth or whatever, depending on the personality, it sounds different, but I was amazed when I discovered how much of little irritability that I was getting from him was me taking things off of his plate and trying to do for him or make decisions instead of just say, why don't you make this decision? And like walking, leaving the room basically like I'm sure that you know best about this. Let me know what you decide. And leaving is so powerful because they rise to the occasion. They recognize you're communicating incompetence to a man when you try to tell him or make suggestions for how to do something. Even if you think, well, I really do know better, or he's about to make a mistake. Even when it feels like the stakes are pretty high. If he wears that to the party, it's going to embarrass me. Or if he takes that route, it's going to take us 15 more minutes to get there. Those things feel like, well, I'm going to avert disaster. Mm-hmm. But what's more important, your intimacy and your connection with your husband, or taking 15 more minutes to get there?
Basically, men should make decisions, women should let them. As a woman, it's your job to not have opinions, to not make suggestions, to let your husband bumble around and waste everyone's time instead of potentially offending him by providing direction.
I'm gonna use a very recent example. We're doing a little addition on our house, and we were talking about which door to buy. Just the back door. I don't care about the back door. I really don't care which door we buy. But I think he was asking, well, what do you think about this door? And it wasn't even really. I realized this is not an opinion that I really have, but we were in the middle of a back and forth conversation about which door. And I realized he's totally able to make this decision alone. I'm not helping him by continuing to give input about this door. I need to say, you just decide and let me know. Whatever you think is best is great with me. And leave that decision-making conversation. I could see a little wind go, it's a tiny thing, but a little wind goes into his sails, And in that moment, he knows she thinks I'm competent to do this thing.
Girl, if you don't stop talking about the back door like that, people are going to think you're talking about something other than a house renovation. With Wife School, you too can learn how to treat your husband like a toddler. No, really, this is parenting advice they give to toddler parents. I know, I have a toddler. Once they learn to do it themselves, don't do it for them, even if it takes longer. So, for example, once your kid learns to put on their shoes by themselves, let them do it, even though it would definitely be faster and more efficient for you to do it for them. That's what helps them learn. That's what helps them do it faster themselves. That is literally what Tilly is saying wives should do with their husbands. It's better to be late, for things to be done incorrectly, for you to be embarrassed, than for you to risk your husband's fragile emotional state by offering a suggestion or a correction. As a reminder, these Christian nationalists will also tell you that women are too emotional to lead. Meanwhile, at the same time, they'll say things like, giving your husband an opinion on a door could risk your intimacy and connection. That could emasculate him. And that brings us to another point that Tilly makes throughout Wife School. Never criticize your husband. She explicitly says you cannot motivate men with criticism. And while that's not terrible advice, usually the carrot motivates people more than the stick. What she defines as criticism is basically just women having any opinion ever. Giving him directions to your kid's school because you're the one who drives them there every single day? Criticism. Asking him to put something back in the fridge when he's done with it? Criticism. Having an opinion on which door to buy for your home renovation? Criticism. Like, letting your husband choose a door for your house isn't a moment that should be so affirming to him. Oh, my wife believes in me. She thinks I'm competent. She trusts my decision-making skills. The thing is, that trust is fake. If you, the wife, need to keep track of all of the household tasks that need to be done, you don't trust your husband to be competent. You're taking on all the mental load. Let me show you an example. This is, again, from Tilly's Instagram. 2 ways to ask your husband to change the oil on Saturday. Monday. It's nice that you take so much time to read to the kids, but I wish you would think more about discipline. Thank you for reading to the kids tonight. I can tell they love it. Tuesday. I'm just struggling with the fact that you ate fast food again today when you know how I feel about it. Thanks for working so hard, babe. Tacos tonight. Wednesday. We never seem to go out anymore. I would love to go on a date with you. Thursday. Would you please get off your phone tonight and talk to me? How was your day? Friday. The oil in the van needs to be changed, and I know you were planning to golf or whatever, but you need to get that done soon. It's been like 6 months. I would go, but I'm super overwhelmed. With trying to get the house ready for the party on Saturday, maybe you could, versus, if you have time tomorrow, would you please get the oil changed in the van? Who's having a better Saturday? Reminder, this started with how to ask your husband to change the oil on Saturday. Why on earth is it a week-long task? You have to praise your husband for an entire week just to do the simple task of getting the oil changed? One, is he not capable of keeping track of the oil level in the car? I thought cars were part of the man's sphere. No? They're domestic? Okay, so what is in the man's jurisdiction? Just having a job and making decisions? Oh, sorry. Also being the spiritual leader. No, you have to build him up all week to ask him to do an incredibly simple task that you probably shouldn't have to remind him in the first place because he's a fully grown adult with presumably functional brain capacity, just so he doesn't resent you. Because remember, regulating his emotions is your job. Didn't you say that when you try to take things off his plate, it's disrespectful? So which is it, Tilly? Should you take remembering to change the oil off his plate because it's your responsibility to be in charge of the domestic mental load? Or should you not, because it's disrespectful to imply he couldn't do it himself? Either way, the wife in this situation is setting herself up for failure because apparently her husband's masculinity is just that fragile. And if anyone is going to give him feedback or constructive criticism, it definitely shouldn't be his wife.
I'd also say that if he has friends in his life, and it would be so, it's wonderful if he does have this, men who will bring things to him. Half the time, his friend bringing it to him, it just works better. I'm not sure why that is. I mean, there are things that only I can see, obviously because I'm there, but it's a joke, it's a joke between us that he'll come home and say, you'll never guess what so-and-so told me today. I really should consider that. And he's joking because it's something that
you had
told him.
Yeah.
6 months ago or whatever. But it's just his life.
Ha ha, ha ha, funny joke. Your wife told you something that you totally ignored, and then when your friend brought it up, you actually listened. Ha ha, so funny. Tilly says that men listen to their male friends more than their wives, but she says, I'm not sure why that is. What do you mean you're not sure why that is? Maybe because your entire culture puts men's opinions over women's? Just a thought. All right, next up, we are moving into the topic of submission. Obviously, Tilly subscribes to the idea that women need to submit to their husbands, but she goes beyond the typical Christian standards of submission, instead telling wives they should practice proactive submission. Basically, Tilly thinks women should find opportunities to be submissive by using what she calls leadership pitches. And this is, again, one of the big pieces of homework in wife school.
A lot of women are really open to the idea of their husbands being leaders in the home, and they read passages like Ephesians 5:22, wives submit to your husbands, and they're like, okay, I'm in. Whoa, somebody's trying to shoot a deer. They're like, yeah, okay, I'm in, but what does that even look like? I've never seen it modeled, or my husband doesn't even really know how to lead. He's not assertive enough that I can even really do what he tells me to do. He doesn't really give me direct commands or even let me know really what he wants directly.
Yeah, sorry, he shouldn't give you direct commands because you're not a dog.
So I would say this is a really great opportunity to grow by practicing proactive submission, which is where you basically set up opportunities where you're giving him leadership pitches, and you're letting him know with these leadership pitches, yes, I do think of you as a leader, and I'm ready to respond to your leadership, and I'm actually leadable.
Okay, so these are the leadership pitches, verbatim from the Wife School homework sheet provided by Elena Trueba on her Substack. I will have that linked in the description. First, ask for his advice. Example, I found this curriculum today. Would you look over it and tell me what you think? Second, ask for his expertise. Example, what do you think about tariffs? Third, ask for his help. Example, would you open this? Can you lift this for me? Fourth, ask for his permission. Example, can I have your blessing to sign up for the women's retreat committee? Is it all right if I go out with the ladies on Saturday? Fifth, ask for his decision. Example, let me know what you want to do and I'll implement. God, this is so embarrassing. Again, this is literally how you talk to a toddler. You kind of trick them into doing things by subtly questioning their abilities. If you tell a toddler, put on your shoes, they might not do it because they'll be defiant about it. But if you say, how fast can you put on your shoes? They'll do it because they're trying to prove something to you. This I found this curriculum. Would you look it over for me? It's the same sort of thing. You're tricking your husband into leading, even though you already did the work. But then at the same time, you're putting all your independence and autonomy to the side to let your husband dictate what you do. And once again, she's couching these really horrendous, regressive tips in some okay relationship advice. Having conversations about important things like homeschool curriculum is objectively a good idea. Discussing political topics like tariffs is smart, especially if one partner is more educated in the subject. The issue here is the gendered nature of all of this. And of course, you shouldn't have to ask your husband's permission to do something. He's not your parent. Have conversations, have discussions, be partners. The thing that's kind of crazy to me is that this is actually a prime example of the woman taking on the leadership role, doing the emotional labor, taking on the mental load, but letting the husband pretend he's in charge. It's the whole, the man is the head, but the woman is the neck that turns the head adage. It's all a farce. They're playing these roles to placate these insecure men. Don't worry, we're not done talking about men's insecurities, but we are moving on to mothering your children and your husband.
For a woman who's very type A, organized, not me, loves running their family on a schedule, how do you navigate challenges when their husband isn't automatically on the same page? They're like, okay, I hear what you're saying, Tilly, but you don't know my husband. If I were to say, you figure it out, why don't you figure out our weekend plans? We will miss every T-ball game. We will be late for everything.
I would say, let it happen. Back up, reestablish with yourself what is more important. Intimacy with your husband, unbroken intimacy where you both feel good things towards each other in the middle of the night when you wake up and you see him laying next to you. When you feel warmth towards each other because you have maintained intimacy with your husband, is that more important than being on time to T-ball? What is more important in this moment? Is it maintaining intimacy or is it being right? And being right, you will find, is not that important. And how about let the failures happen? Back up and let him fail a bit because that's how you learned. My normal day is that I'm teaching math right about now.
So let's say that happens. You let your husband lead, he fails.
Right.
And now you're like, I knew it. I knew I was right.
I knew it. I told you.
How do you address that?
You don't need to talk about that.
You don't talk about it.
You don't talk about that. There's no need. I mean, I can think of a handful maybe of okay, with parenting, I would say I have even this week said, can I talk to you in the bedroom? Not in front of the kids. I'm going to talk to you in the bedroom. And asked him to reconsider the way he handled a specific situation. Very gently and mildly. But not in front of other people.
Right.
Doesn't necessarily have to be in the moment, even if it feels like it really does. And there are so many things that you don't have to say anything about.
So this
when he fails to get them to T-ball in time. Do you think he knows that he failed to get them to T-ball in time?
Sure.
Heck yes, he does. He's totally aware. So do you think that his wife coming back around to just let him know she also knows that he failed to get them to T-ball on time? Do you think that's motivational for him? Or do you think that's poking holes in his wings so that he's going to crash hard? Just like catch more flies with honey, that saying? Somehow women have forgotten how to catch flies.
Yes.
You catch more flies with honey.
Yes, she actually thinks that you should sacrifice your schedule, your timeliness for your husband's ego. Let me just say that this is very harmful to your children. We will miss every T-ball game. We'll be late to everything. If you miss every T-ball game, you're telling your children that their passions, their activities, their commitments don't matter to you as a family. But Tilly says you just need to let that happen because that's how they learn. That's how you learned. He's not a child. And this is what I mean when I say that these wives are mothering their husbands. And it's intentional. Husbands' egos always come before children's needs. Here's an example from Tilly's Instagram. Which do you think kids need more? 1, to hear mom say they're good at stuff, or to hear mom say that their dad is good at stuff? I'm gonna stop you right there. To hear mom say they're good at stuff. Unequivocally. Praising your children is incredibly important to their development of self-worth, trust, safety, and sense of accomplishment. I'm not saying you shouldn't praise your husband, but that doesn't contribute to your child's growth the same way that direct and consistent praise does. Obviously, Tilly disagrees. Mom, if you want secure kids, speak well of their dad. 1, refer to his unique abilities. 2, refer to his ordinary habits of faithfulness. 3, refer to and reinforce his authority. Do this stuff in front of dad and it's even better. Again, in this culture, wives are taught to praise their husbands for doing the absolute bare minimum, especially when it comes to parenting. Dad gives the kids a bath. Wow, oh my goodness, you're the best dad ever. Dad drops the kids off at school. What an involved dad. Parenting should be the job of both parents. But in this culture, parenting is mandatory and expected for mothers, while it's optional and praiseworthy for fathers. And kids pick up on that dynamic. They know their dad is the secondary parent, and it actually teaches them that men are less competent parents. The thing here is that, on the whole, praising your spouse and talking positively about them is objectively good advice. The problem is when it's one directional. Where's the husband school that tells men to praise their wives and uplift them around the kids? Yeah, it doesn't exist. But this equal dynamic might appear to exist on social media.
Maybe you're willing to, post great things about him on Instagram. Maybe you're willing to do a whole lot of PR for your little family unit. But how you speak to your husband in private is the measure of what kind of a wife you really are.
Hey, so you shouldn't have to do PR for your family unit, but this is so telling about who these women truly are. They expect to be unhappy in their marriages because they're treated as inferior by the entire community. So they have to plan to lie on social media, to post a highlight reel, to only share the positives so it looks like they have picture perfect lives. They live in this state of dishonesty, both internally and externally.
Can a wife's peace influence her kids, and how does that start with her marriage dynamic?
I mean, that would be like the understatement of the century to say a wife's peace will influence your children. Your peace will make a life for your children. It'll make or break the home that they grow up in. Your mood is the air that they're breathing in the home. It's the atmosphere that's floating around in your house. Your peace before the Lord and your ability to be cheerful and present and industrious in your home will have a huge impact on your children. It impacts what they think is normal behavior for themselves when they're adults, but it also impacts their idea of whether they had a happy day. That happy wife, happy life thing, it can be silly, I think, the way it's used, but the truth is a woman is the air in a house, and it can be sweet air or it can be foul air.
Of course, a mom's peace can influence her kids, but no mention of dads. Moms are responsible for child rearing. Dads are just there to lead. As she was talking about this peace and what it means to be a good mom, I couldn't stop thinking about Michelle Duggar. She is always positive and calm and soft-spoken and cheerful. And sure, maybe on a day-to-day basis, that means the kids are content. But that attitude also overlooks real challenges that kids are facing, including abuse. Do you think any of the Duggar kids can look back at their childhood and think it was totally wonderful because their mom was peaceful, knowing the abuse that was happening inside their home? You think their lives weren't marred by that negativity? And that brings us to our next topic, which is abuse. Tilly eventually acknowledges that her course is not really meant to address complex issues such as what to do if you are being abused, but she doesn't bring it up until the very end of wife school, which seems like it maybe would have been a good thing to mention at the beginning. When she does talk about abuse, she doesn't really talk about abuse.
I have to address, because I know some people listening will be up in arms if I don't. You emphasize a wife's responsibility to move from quarrelsome to grateful. But some women, like those in abusive or deeply unbalanced marriages, might feel like, well, that's placing the burden solely on me. So how would you address a wife whose husband isn't living with her in an understanding way, as 1 Peter 3:7 calls for? And what role does his biblical responsibility play into breaking the cycle of contention in a marriage?
Right. Obviously it's huge. And you have men who are just wicked, and you have men who are, don't understand how to repent, who are just hard-hearted. And of course, that's a very difficult place to be. But I think the same passage that you just referenced is the passage that speaks to a wife who's married to an unbelieving husband and says, you can't drag him to church with you. You can't, Bible thump him all the time. You can't, you will do better by your husband to win him with your meek and quiet spirit, your gentleness. And, assuming that your physical safety is not in question, I would say a wife's ability to continue to gently live with and support and speak kind words to her husband are so powerful that you never know what the Lord may do. But you don't do it because it works, because you know that it works. You do it because the Lord has asked you to do it. You do it as unto Christ, because it's what he has asked, even in that passage. And let your adorning be the adorning of that beautiful spirit that will not fade. And there will be a return on that, even if it's not a return that you can see inside your marriage with your husband, repenting. So I would say there is hope. But the joy on the other side of just walking faithfully is yours whether he repents or not, because that's before him and the Lord. That's between them.
This is one of the most infuriating clips from this interview because it'll come as no surprise to anyone, but they only see physical abuse as real abuse. Tilly says, unless your physical safety is in danger, your job as a wife is to live with it and be kind to your husband. Emotional abuse, financial abuse, spiritual abuse, sexual coercion, those aren't real. If those are things a wife is dealing with, it's her responsibility to just shut up and take it. If you're being abused, it's your fault. Be a dutiful, meek, gentle wife. Be kind, thank your husband, and just be faithful. If you're being abused, it's your fault because you're too outspoken, too opinionated, and it's emasculating to your husband. Tilly only seems concerned about whether a husband will repent, which one, wasn't Alex's question, and two, doesn't absolve him of abuse. Oh, my husband is so wicked and berates me and puts me down, but he repented, so all is well. That is so problematic. Our final topic, of course, we have to talk about physical intimacy. Tilly doesn't really have any clips that I could find, but you can probably imagine what her views are. Women exist to please men, and that includes in the bedroom. In Wife School, she says, it is a blessing to your husband for you to enjoy sex. Our husbands expect a yes from us. Offer yourself to a husband with a good will, and you'll never regret it. Why do they expect a yes from you? Because you've never been taught about consent. These communities tend to not believe in marital rape because a woman's body belongs to her husband to use whenever and however he sees fit. Tilly also says that women should receive sex with joy, as though it's a Christmas present to you and you don't really want it, but you have to pretend to like it. What's kind of wild to me is the shift you see in expectations for women from single to married. Single women are supposed to be chaste and modest and virgins, but as soon as they're married, they're supposed to be these sexual beings who are always prepared to receive sex. I know a lot of ex-evangelicals and ex-Mormons talk about the challenges they go through in early marriage relating to sex, especially women. In an article published in Desiring God earlier this month, Tilly wrote, as the more complex partner, part of the wife's joyous duty is to tend not only to her husband's pleasure, but to her own. A woman should not be afraid of this process. In fact, her own pleasure is part of the gift she gives her husband. He is blessed in the blessing of her. She is blessed in the blessing of him. They are mutually blessed in this singular act of intimacy, a priceless picture of eternal oneness between Christ and his church. Wives are supposed to enjoy sex whether they're actually experiencing any pleasure or not, meaning wives are supposed to enjoy sex for their husband's benefit. No surprise, this leads to problematic views around sex for both partners. Not to mention, there's usually a complete lack of sex education in these communities, so they're often going to their first sexual encounters with no real understanding of what to expect, other than the fact that it's commanded by God and supposed to be enjoyable. There's also a lot of shame around sex for these couples because they're supposed to go from rejecting and suppressing any sexual desires they have when they're single to embracing their God-given sexuality in a single day, their wedding day. And there's a lot of pressure to not just enjoy sex for yourself, but to make sure that you're pleasing your husband and ultimately getting pregnant. Tilly's lesson here is that sex is the only hobby you've been commanded not to neglect by God. There's no mention of what healthy communication should look like in a marital bed or what it looks like if you don't immediately enjoy sexual intimacy. At the end of the day, the point I'm trying to make here is that wife school is dangerous. It teaches women to ignore their own feelings, desires, and goals in service to their husbands. Wife school enables weaponized incompetence, and it builds unequal relationships. It puts women in precarious financial situations and primes them for problematic and sometimes abusive relationships with their husbands. And mostly it teaches them to lie, to smile through the pain, to force themselves to feel gratitude, and to pretend that everything is picture perfect. In this culture, suffering is something to be proud of. It proves you're sacrificing yourself for God. And nothing is more holy in Christianity than a martyr. Wife school conditions women to conceal the reality of their lives on the internet, to their spouses, and ultimately to themselves, all in the name of faith. Tilly sums it up best herself when she says, if you're going to suffer, suffer as a righteous woman. All right, that's where I'm going to wrap up this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you're new here, I would love for you to follow, subscribe, like, comment, all of those things. I want to hear your thoughts on wife school. Had you heard of it before this? Do you think there's any helpful advice in there? Is it all problematic? I want to know what you guys think. Obviously, I made my opinions pretty clear, but I want this to be a discussion. How dangerous do you think wife school really is? If you like this kind of content, make sure to subscribe or follow me on all of my other social media. I'm always at Ileana Justine. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
That's a little shaft of pleasure and glory that God has given you in that moment. It's just a little taste of the thing that's coming.
Just the back door. I don't care about the back door.